Okay. So I'm going to go back to our original version of that file. I think it's in week or session number 6, I think is where it is. Let me check just to make sure. Because it's in 7. Okay, we might as well start with the fresh one, guys. This isn't, again, it's not part of the homework per se, but yeah. Okay, so we're just I'm gonna kind of take off here and do this. If you get lost or you miss a step or you stop a step or whatever, just shout out and just say, Versa, wait, I'm not there, whatever. But I want to make sure everybody understands this, but I also want to get this through this pretty quick. Is that okay? All right. So first things first, make a copy of this top layer. I mean, the only layer, and I'm going to rename it low. L-O-W, not E. Shoot. I would not myself. Now you can bring the entire group over if you want and actually steal from it. But right now, I don't want to screw up your work. So I've got a low here that's, so that's what I want. I'm going to actually drag down and make a copy of this, and I'm going to rename that copy high. And I build these first. I do these first before I actually do the copies of these, the safety copies of these. So I'm going to turn off high. I'm going to turn the eyeball off. I'm going to select low to make sure that low is actually active. And then I zoom in. I'm just going to zoom into this girl's eye. And I'm in at 100%. There's no magic number about this. I just need to see the detail in this. So again, I go up to the filter menu and I come down to blur. Gaussian blur, and I do this in increments of 3 pixels. So I'm going to start with a 3, and what I'm looking for here is I'm trying to find the point at which I blur this enough that it gets really rid of the detail or the high frequency work. So I typically, eyelashes and eyebrows are things that I look at a lot. But again, if you're doing landscapes, you're going to be looking at you're going to be looking at what you consider to be real detail. So it wouldn't be like the wall, like in this room, if we were talking about detail in this room, it wouldn't be the white board itself. It would sure be the push pins on it, and it would be the rivets here that are in the wall. It would be the line edge like that. Those would all be detail that I would consider. So at any rate, that's what I'm looking to do. I don't think 3 is losing all that detail enough, so I'm going to go to 6. Again, this is in increments of 3. 6 might actually work for me, but here's the trick. There's no real magic number in this. However, the more we blur this, the more we actually move to the high detail layer. The less we blur this, the more we keep down onto the low layer. For me, I don't think this is strong. Shoot, sorry.
What happened? It's doing the same thing where I move the, oh, I can, but like, it's just acting weird, and it's just like.
Let's try. It sees everybody. Let me see a pen really quick. It's seeing it there.
And you can move the trunk.
No, I can't get this guy up here. I'm getting, oh, you have the touch on this is still on.
Oh.
Guys, if you keep touch on your computer, laptop, all that kind of stuff, whatever, it is just, you're asking for a world of hurt on this. So let me undo that. Get rid of that. Where's your dock? Go to the Finder. Oh, it's over here on the side, over here. Go to the Finder at the top, Application folder, and then go all the way down to Wacom Tablet. And hang on one second. And then let's plug this back. Go ahead and plug that guy back in. And we are going to...
Every time I tell somebody that's what it makes it pause, they're like,
It's like going
yeah, he's very
touch settings.
Oh, so I have to
And
do
then
the
we are
same.
turning this off.
Okay, so I have to do this each time I get.
I don't know why, but it's just another reason I hate these tablets.
I have to turn it off every single time I open it.
Okay.
Well, it was funny on their website.
So Michael's saying yes.
It's like sold out.
So try that now.
Ugh.
Do you see it?
Nope. Oh.
Now try it. You see?
Oh, it's.
This is rebooting.
Maybe turn it in tablet mode.
What into tablet mode? Oh, thank you.
Maybe it's switching. Like screen. Now try.
Don't worry, you don't need to do this with a tablet. We'll figure this out at lunch. You can just
Okay.
unplug this,
I mean,
do
the
it
other
by.
tablets work for me.
Okay. Well, here, do you want to try this other one?
I don't have that.
Okay, we'll figure it out at lunch, all right? Okay, guys, here we go. So 6 is not strong enough blur for me here, so I'm going to go to 9. That seems to be strong enough for me. That's killed what I really would consider to be the detail. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Then I am going to activate the high layer again. I'm going to turn its eyeball on again to make it active. So again, I'm up on the high layer right now. And so now what we need to do is we need to subtract this low layer information from this current layer, and what will end up remaining is the high frequency detail. So to do that, make sure that the high layer is active. Come up to the image menu, down to apply image. And in the drop-down menu that we got, again, you've only got one file open. If you had multiple files open in this source, you would have multiple things that you would be able to pick. But in our case, we only have one open, and that's fine. It's less confusing. In terms of the layer, what we're going to do is you need to pick the low layer, because what we're saying is we want to subtract this low layer from the current layer, the high layer that we're actually on. Then in the drop-down menu here from blending mode, we're going to change it from multiply down to subtract. And then you set it as a scale of 2 and an offset of 128. What these values really do is they essentially take anything that is being pulled out of this layer, anything that would not be considered detail, and making it a middle gray so that it doesn't have any impact. So you can see all the areas in here that we typically would consider to be low frequency, like this area in here. You can see some texture in here, but there's a lot of this area in here. It's just going to gray. It's going to a middle gray because when we change the blending mode of the layer, that middle gray doesn't show up. So I'm going to say OK to this. And then finally, in this high layer right here, we need to change the blending mode from normal down to linear light. And now your image should look the same. To see if it is the same, simply drag across both of the eyeballs, and it turns both of them off, and then drag right back again. And you don't see any shift in your layer, which is exactly what we want to have happen. So is this working for everyone? Okay, so to make this a non-destructive setup, you need to copy your low layer. So simply come down to your low, you don't need to turn anything on or off, just come down to your low layer and click on it and drag down, and that has made a copy of it. This is now the low version here, and this is the copy up here that we're actually going to work on. To do the same thing for the high, it's a little bit more complicated. To do it for the high, you actually, again, click on the high to make it active, click on it and drag it down onto the corner, or if you're like Jenny, she just does Command-J, it makes a copy of its own layer to do that. But now you'll see that your image gets really hyper contrasty, and so we need to change how this setup works. It's not as simple as the low copy. So to get this to function correctly, you need to change the blending mode of this high copy to normal. But then you need to clip this high copy to the one that's underneath it. And what clipping means is that the one underneath it is going to essentially function as a mask for this layer right here. So again, to actually build the clipping group, hover your cursor between the two layers. So my cursor is right on the border between high copy and high. Hold down the Option key and you'll see that your cursor turns into this little square with an arrow that points down. If you then click on that, you'll actually see that this entire layer kicks over to the right a little bit with a little arrow now that's pointing down. This is an indication that this has now been clipped to the high layer. And so it gives us a safety. Does that make sense what's going on? Yes, Katya.
I flipped mine, but it made it more.
You need to change the blending mode of this top layer back to normal. Yes, you did. Okay, so when I was doing this last week and I was actually trying to fix these things, it was not working for me. So there's another method that you could actually use to do this if you wanted to. And the other method would be to do this. You could, I'm not going to go down the other method because I've gotten all this written out. Never mind, we're going to find out if mine works correctly today as opposed to what was going down last week. So then to do the typical work that we would normally do on this, let's say for instance, I want to deal with the skin that's sitting up here on her forehead that's right up in here. I want to get rid of, I want to smooth out this skin. I don't want all of these little pores to actually show on this. So to do that, this is high copy information. This is detail information. That's what's going on up in here. I'm going to select the high copy layer. This is the one that I'm working on. I'm going to go to the patch tool. So the patch tool is in the spot healing group. It's the third one down, and I'm going to select patch tool. And then I'm going to come up into this area that's right up in here where I've got those pores that I'm trying to hide. And I work small. I don't work in giant areas. I don't try to grab one big giant area all in once. So actually I'm just going to come here and I'm going to do, the patch tool is a selection tool. And so I've just got an active selection going on up there. Is that working for everyone? Everybody's got this part? And then I'm simply going to drag the patch tool. Again, you bring your cursor that is right in the middle of the marching ants. And you can click and drag this selection to an area that it does not have all those pores in it. It's a much smoother area right now. And let go, and it replaces that. But what it didn't change was any of the color. The coloring didn't change at all. It was just that texture. If you hit Command Z to undo that, Command D to deselect, you can actually go back in time when you use the patch tool. So if you look at your history palette, we can go back and forth between these two. So you can go back to the create clipping mask and you see a bunch of pores there, or come back down to deselect and you can see that the skin has been moved. So it's relatively simple to understand what the high frequency layer is actually doing. It's smoothing out the texture. Texture is high frequency. However, if we look down, I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit so we can actually see where it is. I'm going to come down and it's this area that's just to the right of her nose. For me, I think that there's a shadow that's right here on her skin. It's this area that's right in here. That looks like a shadow to me. I don't necessarily want to replace the texture of that. I think the texture down here is actually correct. So I simply want to replace the color of it. I think that this is too dark. So there's a number of ways of doing that. So to do that, you can come down here. Again, I'm going to work on the low copy because anything I do on this will actually be reflected. If I screw something up down here, I've always got the version that's sitting down here that I can steal that information from. So I'm working on my low copy. I'm going to try the patch tool again. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm going to actually circle around the area that I feel like is darker right here. And then I'm going to drag it down here to this area of skin that seems to me to be a little bit lighter. That's what I'm going to actually try, and we'll see how it works. So I'm going to click down here, and I'm going to come down to something that's a little bit lighter. And then again, hit Command D to deselect. And you can see that it's actually completely lightened that guy up. If you want to see the difference in the two, go to your history palette, click on the deselect, and you'll go back and you'll see it's dark. You can click on the reselect and you can see that it's lighter again. Does that make sense to everyone? So it's like we did this same work, or we were going after the same work using tonal retouching when we were doing the large tonal retouching layer, not the detail one, but the large one, to make areas darker and lighter. It's just that simple, right? However, I want everybody to go back in history before you use the patch tool to do that. You don't need to undo the one that's actually up at the top. There's another trick to this that you can actually use, and here's the trick. And this is something I will do with a tablet if my tablet works. So let's see. People go after this a million different ways, and so that part's actually working right there. So I'm going to show you a couple tricks in here, and we'll see if they don't help us out in this. So again, I'm going to go down, make sure that you are working on the low copy layer here, because this, again, this is a tonal color issue. This is not a detail issue. And let's say we want to lighten this whole thing up. What you can actually do is, because we can sample color that's closer to what we want, we can actually paint into this, is what I'm trying to say here. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it a much smaller brush. I'm going to check the edge of this brush on my drop-down menu. You want to make sure that this is a completely soft brush. Mine is. You want to also make sure that the blending mode is normal. The opacity is 100%. But you want to change the flow of this way down. You want to bring the flow of this brush down to, like, I'm going to see what a 9% looks like, because this can take off on you really fast. So again, remembering what flow is. Flow allows density to build over time. If you take this 9% brush and we just start scrubbing back and forth with it, it will eventually get to 100%, but it takes a period of time. So it slows it down is what it's really doing, and it gives you the time to adjust how much of this you want to brush in and how much you don't. Make sense? All right. So then we need to sample a color. So again, it's the same trick as when we're trying to remove spill. If you hold down the Option key while you temporarily have a brush, you can select this lighter tone. I'm looking for a lighter tone of skin. You could even come way up here and select this lighter tone of skin right here. And you can see now I've got a very light tone of skin that's right here, and I need to then use that to paint over this area really quickly. So I'm going to make my brush just a tick smaller. Again, really low flow on this guy, and then I'm going to simply come in and I'm going to start scrubbing. And you can see just how fast that took off on me. Way too fast. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm going to drop my flow down to like a 2 or 3%. And then I'm going to go in and do the exact same thing again. And now you can see as I'm scrubbing back and forth, I'm actually able to slowly bring that in so that it is now the same skin tone. And again, because I've only done one single brush stroke, Command Z takes me back and forth. And you can see the difference in those two. Does that make sense to everyone? So Connor, does that help answer sort of what's going on with these color and tone issues? It's really to do this kind of work is what most people do on that part. But again, you'll also see areas like this. So the area here that is the cigarette burn. Now, I've never tried this, but we can try it right now. I'm going to go back up to my high copy, the one that's sitting right up here at the top. I am going to go back to the patch tool again. So again, I'm going to select the patch tool, and then I'm going to select this entire thing I've always called the cigarette burn, and I'm going to drag this guy down and let go. And you can see that it replaces the texture, but it does not change the tone. The tone is still made up of that really dark stained color that was underneath. So I've got to do both. I've got to replace the texture, which I have done, but now I need to replace the color part. So if you go back down to your low copy layer right here, I've still got the patch tool is still active, but I'm on my low copy right now. I can simply click and drag that and let go, and then it does the same thing. So instead of, that's really what happens. The thing that we just went through is how all the healing brush tools work. It's a two-step process. It just seems more, it appears to us as being a single step, but now since we've split it out to have two different versions of this, it ends up being 2 steps. Does this make sense for everyone? Is this working for everyone? Are we good on this part? Yes?
And then from that, what would be a good way to handle the eyes in terms of coloring, I think?
To change the eye color, is that what you're talking about, or what?
To get the, like, veins out of the eye.
Oh, okay, so let's go up. No, let's just go take a look at them. So let's go up to the top. Let's see if we find something that's got, actually, yeah, there's one here. If we go to our left eye, there's a much more pronounced one. You're talking about this guy right here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go back, for me, right off the bat, I'm going to feel like that is detail. I may have, once I do the detail change, I may see a small shadow of color or tone, so I may have to do that same trick again. I may have to go to both layers, but this strikes me as detail. So I'm going to come up to my high copy layer and make sure that it is active. You don't only need to use the patch tool. We'll see what the patch tool looks like. So I'm simply going to click around this guy and then drag it up here and let go and hit Command D to deselect, and it did a pretty fair job of it. It looks to me like, and again, this is just the difference in really good retouchers and really great retouchers. It looks to me like it drew some of the skin color up into the eyeball. There's a little bit of tone that came up with it. So I'm not convinced that that's actually the best way to do it. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Again, Command Option Z will take me back to bring that this guy back in. Command D to deselect. Instead, I'm going to go after this with the clone stamp tool. So again, all the tools are available for you to work on this high copy right here. Clone stamp tool is the S key. Again, I'm going to check my brush to see what's going on. Now this has got a 50% hardness brush. I don't really want a solid line where the eyeball meets the eyelid. I want a little bit softer edge there, but I don't. So anyway, I'm going to crank this up closer to about an 85% hardness. That'll give me just a soft enough edge on there that I think I'll be able to get away with it. I'm going to click again on the name Adobe to get rid of that drop-down menu. Make sure that your blending mode is set to normal. 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then again, we're only going to be working on this current layer. This is where I ran into some trouble last week. So I'm going to keep it only to working on this current layer because this is the only place that I want to be sampling from. And then I'm going to come up here to the eyeball and hold down the Option key to click a sample point, and then I'm going to actually take that eyeball out. Now I feel like that was a little too aggressive. I was just hit that, this line that's going right under her eye, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit tighter, and then again, I'm going to go after this and respect that line. And then that actually has killed that part. Make sense? There's another way we can do it, a third way we can do it, so I'm going to go back in time, Command Z, and the third way you can do it is this. This is a little bit trickier. No, actually, I take it back. I'm not going to do that. I am going to, though, get rid of this guy again, and then see if I can't get the recovery. So I have now removed this from the high copy right here. However, if you turn off the eyeball of high copy, you should see it come back because now the one that's underneath it is the one that's in control right here. So again, I was showing you guys, because this is our version here, how we can recover, how we can bring this information in this high layer up into the high copy. So if I needed to undo something and I didn't have it in history, let's say I'd saved this file, I'd closed it up, I didn't have the history anymore to be able to go back and undo it right now, the way I could salvage this would be to go to the high layer, sample that information, and bring it into the high copy as a way of restoring my screw up. Does that make sense? If I felt like this vein was a screw up. So this is what did not work for me last week, although I do this all the time. So I don't know if it's I don't know why this didn't work, and it may not work right now, but we're going to find out. So I am going to select the high copy itself. You can even turn the eyeball off if it makes it feel, it'll show it to you a little bit easier, and you can sort of see it's right here. So again, I'm going to do the clone stamp tool, the S key, make sure that you are only working on current layer, and I'm going to then sample right here where I think that eyeball, where that whole thing actually starts right there. So I'm going to do it on the junction right there between the two. So I'm holding down the Option key. I'm going to click and set a sample point right there. And then I'm going to turn on the eyeball for my high copy. I'm going to make my high copy active, make sure that I'm still only working on current layer. And then I'm going to enable aligned. I want to make sure that this goes wherever I start and wherever I click comes back in. And then I'm going to simply click on this and paint the vein back in. And it worked this time, so at least I don't feel like a complete idiot. Are there questions about this? Are we good on this? So the same thing would hold true if we go down and take a look at the shadow that we removed from this area down here. So again, if you go back to your low layer, so you can see here in the low layer, sorry, let me go down here. I'm turning off low copy, and it brings back that stain that's actually there on on the side of her face. If I wanted to bring that back for certain here, again, I would select the low layer right here, I'm still working with the clone stamp tool. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. And I'm going to sample again. I can't see it now, but I'm going to sample that low layer right there. Option click to select that area, and then again come back to my the low copy part right here and simply turn the eyeball on, and then simply paint back in the information that existed on the virgin low copy down there. Is that working for all of you guys? All right, are there any other questions about this part? Yes.
So basically for the skin textures,
Yes.
for example,
Yes.
you don't have to care about the color tone of the model.
No, that's the reason we do it, is so that you eliminate having to worry about the color and the tone.
So you just look at the composition and what kind of face will fit them on the picture.
Well, in this one, I'm stealing it from herself.
No, but for the homework.
Yeah.
So like out of all the textures, like you just look at the composition to pick which one.
Yeah, well, you have to look at, we should actually take a look at that. Are you talking about the girl who's on the green? Yeah, we should take a look at that one anyway. So you can close this up, guys. There is a redo for this assignment, so if you want to save that version of the homework, you're already set up to actually use it. But I'm going to go back and take a look at, Sarah's talking about 7.2, and I want to take a look at the assignments. And I think it's the same one we're talking about. Yeah, it is. It's this guy right here, right? Yep, that guy. Okay, I need everybody to open this one anyway. You can, let's open a version of this. If you've got another copy of that, don't worry about the other copy, because any work that we do on this one, you can always drag into the homework that you've already done. So, but if we screw something up here, I don't want to screw up your homework, although you've turned your homework in. So, at any rate. Okay, so really quickly for this, I'm actually going to do a quick knockout, because this is the other problem that you run into doing split frequency work, is the knockout work. So I just want to make sure everybody understands how to do this part of it all. So we are going to do, first off, I'm actually going to do the knockout. So if you've got the history action that's the 0 selective color, that's great. Simply go ahead and run it. If you don't, we'll actually do it from scratch right now. So I'm simply going to come over here to this part. I'm going to click on Add Hue Saturation, and then I'm going to click on also Add Selective Color. With selective color active, I'm going to take the reds and drag the black ink all the way to the right. I'm going to then go to the yellows and do the exact same thing. I'm going to go to the greens and do the exact same thing. I'm going to go to the cyans and exactly the same, only the black ink, that's all I'm kicking over. The blues, same thing. The magentas, same thing. The whites, same. The neutrals, the same, and then finally the blacks, the same. Now if your image looks like this, it's all solarized, it's because you need to change the radio button down at the bottom from relative to absolute. And then finally we're going to go back up to the greens and drag that slider from 100% black ink to negative 100% black ink, which is white ink. And you can see it begins to separate the background from our mask, because we're actually, everything else in this image got flooded with black ink. We're now trying to flood this background with white ink, but the color, the purity of that green is not that good, and that's why this didn't go white. It's close-ish, but it's not really that great. So to make the green more pure, we need to saturate it, and that's why this original hue saturation layer got put in below it. So if you click on the hue saturation layer and then come back up in properties and click on the hand that has the double-headed arrow, you get the targeting adjustment tool. With the targeting adjustment tool selected, come back to an area of green. Now I'm going to do it mine down on the bottom, and we'll just take a look and see what happens. And I'm going to click, and as soon as I click, you'll notice that it changed this from master to this range of green right in here. This is the area that just got picked. And again, I'm going to simply click and drag to the right to make it more saturated, to the left to desaturate it. When I completely desaturate it, it's no longer green, and that's why the whole image goes black, is because this the selective color can't impact, there's no green left in it, so there's nothing to impact. But at any rate, I'm going to go all the way back to the right, and you can actually see it's actually popped a lot of this. It's better. It's not great, but it's better. So at this stage of the game, I'm going to copy my red channel, And I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and I've got the copy right down here, and I'm going to rename that Knockout. And say OK to that. Then my hue, saturation, and selective color have done their work, so I'm simply going to throw them away. You don't need them anymore. There's no reason. Oh, wait, I do want to show you one thing, though. I'm going to bring this back. You can see in this setup right now that I've actually got a hue saturation layer. Let me make this a little bit bigger just so that you can see this area here. So you can see I've got my green copy right, or my image copy right here. I've got my hue saturation layer here that's actually making this green more green, and then the selective color is saying I want you to fill those greens with white ink, and that's why we get what we've got. So are there any questions about why this looks the way it looks? However, if you take the hue sat layer and drag it on top of your selective color, you will see that it changes and that nothing happens here now. No matter what, you turn this on and off, nothing changes. And the reason nothing is changing here now is this selective color layer is now in between the two, and the selective color has removed all of the it's removed all the green. It's replaced the green with white ink. So it's no longer having the effect that we want it to have. Does that make sense? So the hue sat has got to come first in order to impact the green that's down here. But at any rate, it's done all its work. I can throw both of those away. You don't need them anymore. You do have the knockout layer that's down here, so I'm going to select the knockout layer, and then I'm going to go looking. I think this area over here on the left-hand side, this is still got more contamination in it than anything else. So this is where I'm going to actually set my color sampler points. So again, I'm simply going to come over to the eyedropper tool and come down to color sampler tool. And then I don't want to click on a piece of hair in here, but I do want to click on something that's pretty dark in here. So I'm going to go after that spot right there. And then as long as we're at it, well, we'll just see. Let me take a look at this. I see a little bit of, oh, I bet it's over here. Yeah, we'll see what happens when we run levels on this. So I'm just going to leave this one sample point down there. Command L brings up the levels dialog box. And again, I now have got this number 1 point right over here. I need to click on the drop down menu and change it to RGB color. And then you can see I've got these 2 11s right here. So I need to grab my white point slider, the white point on my slider at the very top, and start to drag it back. And I'm just watching my info readout until I get close to 255, but not quite there. Then I'm going to go to my arrow keys to actually tap me back in. And I finally got to 255. I'm going to go in and take a look around all of this image now. I've got some contamination of hairs and all this stuff back in here, but that's not background. That background is actually pretty cleaned out. I'm looking at this area over in here. That background is also pretty cleaned out. I haven't committed to levels yet. And then I'm going to come up here to the very top corner up in here. And you can see in the very top corner up in here, I have not kicked all of that out. You can see I'm reading a 248 in that background part up in there. So this tells me this area, this corner up here would have been a better place to sample. So I'm going to hit cancel out of this. And then I'm simply going to put another sampler point right up here in the corner. That's where I saw the problem. And then again, Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. And now I want to watch my point number 2. I don't care if the point number 1 will actually already get to 255. So I'm going to again click on my white point slider, drag it back till I get close to 255. In my second readout right here, I'm at a 253. I'm going to go to my arrow keys and tap it in till I get to 255. And again, that's gone to 255 now. That's clean, and the other one had already long gone to 255. So before you say OK, I'm going to zip back out and just take a look around. And that seems pretty clean to me. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then finally, I'm going to use this to see how well we did. So I'm going to come over to my background copy right here. So I'm back on my layers palette on my background copy. If you scroll to the very top of your channels palette and click RGB, it'll show it to you. So I've got my layers palette that's right here. I'm going to add a solid color layer on top of this. So to do that, it's just an adjustment layer. I'm going to click, no, that's an add mask layer. I'm going to click on the adjustment colors, and I'm going to come up and say I want to add a solid color to the top. And then I want to add white, so I'm going to actually just drag across red and type in 255. Hit the tab key, 255 green, tab key 255 blue, and I'm going to say okay to that. And so this is now just a white color that's sitting on top of my image. I'm now going to make a copy of my image. So the copy exists right here. I'm going to drag the copy on top of the solid color. Then I'm going to come back over to my channels palette. I'm not going to select the knockout channel. I'm simply going to hover over the icon of it, hold down the command key, and click to load that as a selection. And then back into my layers palette, I'm going to click on Add Layer Mask. And again, typical of all the ways that I always do this, the mask is inverted. It's showing the background and not the image, or not the person. I want just the opposite of that. So to fix that, simply hit Command-I. And then I'm going to just double click on the hand and take a look at my work. And you can see that other than the spill and there's some contamination that's still down in here. You can see down in here there's hair down there. I would fix all of this as I would normally fix it. But the problem that I've got right now is how do I then do split frequency work on this? And it doesn't work if I do it here because I've got a layer mask that's actually on here. When I go to blur the image, it's going to blur the layer mask. It won't keep any of this connected for me the way I want it to be connected. So instead, I'm going to throw this layer mask away. And I am not going to apply it. Applying it would remove all of that green background. That's not what I want to do. I simply want to delete it. And this now is going to become my initial split frequency work. So with this layer right now turned on, I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to call it low or low. I'm going to make a copy of it. This is just exactly what we did before. I'm going to double click on this and call it high. I'm going to turn off the eyeball for high. I'm going to activate low again. I'm going to zoom into this girl's eye or any place that I feel like I really have detail. It's a little too zoomed in. This feels good to me right here, so I'm sort of checking this part out. Again, on my low layer by itself, I'm going to go up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. I always start back at 3. I start at the lowest. You don't want to make this any more aggressive than you need to be. 3 is not strong enough, so I'm going to go to 6. 6 is looking like a pretty good candidate, but I want to see what 9 looks like as well. So I'm going to try 9. I'm going to go back and look at 6 again. I think I'm going to stick with 9. So I'm going to go back up to 9 again. I feel better about that. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to 9. So now I've got my low copy has been made. I'm going to click on my high copy right now. I'm going to turn its eyeball on. Again, with the very same thing that we did before. With the high eyeball on, the layer itself active, up to the image menu, down to apply image. Image menu will open up. You need to change the layer up the top here again to low because we are subtracting this low layer from everything else. And now in this case, because I've already done this once today and haven't quit Photoshop, this the way this thing gets set up is sticky. It just remembers it. But if it didn't, by default, it usually goes to multiply. This is the default that usually happens. But at any rate, in our case, even if it did, you would simply change this to subtract. Again, a scale of 2, an offset of 128, and say OK to that. So this is now the beginning of how we would actually do this. Change this blending mode from normal down to linear light. And this is now set up for our split frequency work. However, it's not enough yet. We would need to make our safeties. So I'm going to come back, bless you, back down to my low copy and simply make a copy of it. I'm going to do the same thing with the high. I'm going to click on the high. I'm going to make a copy of it. But then remember, we need to change the blending mode of this high copy back to normal. And we also need to create a clipping group right here. So again, hovering your cursor between those two layers, hold down the Option key, click to get that drop-down menu. So this is now my split frequency work group right in here. And I can do all my split frequency work. However, it hasn't been separated from the background. If I want to separate it from the background, I've seen people go in and they'll actually put that knockout mask on every single one of these layers. You don't want to do that. Again, you've got blur, that blur layer in here will not really respect that. You end up with this really faint glow that comes out into your new background. So instead what you do is you simply want to select all of the layers that make up your split frequency work. So I'm going to click on the low one to begin with. Then I'm going to simply scroll up to the top. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click on the top one. And you can see that the 4 layers that make up my split frequency group now have all been selected. And then simply go to this drop-down menu and say you want to do a new group from layers. And it'll give you a chance to name it. And I'm going to call this split frequency group. Don't worry, I'll do it again. And say OK. And then what you should end up with is a group of images that has got named split frequency, and all of those split frequency layers is in here. So should we go through that again really quick? So then you put your layer mask on that group. So again, you come to the knockout part here, Command click to load this as a selection, and then groups can actually have layer masks as well. So you put the layer mask on the group itself. And again, the layer mask needs to be inverted, Command I, and it actually inverts it now, and we are good to go. Make sense? Now, in this case, finally, just so that you know, I know that I've actually got a problem here because I've got spill in all of this. That's still actually happening to me here. So what I would in all likelihood do, because I've got to remove this spill at some stage of the game, and it's a question for me. So for me, what I would probably do in this scenario is I would do all my split frequency work first, and then I would remove the spill. Make sense? So to do that, I'm going to throw this layer mask away, the one that we just added really quickly. And guys, give me 5 minutes and we'll take a break. So simply throw that layer mask away and delete it. And go ahead and open up the group. And we're only going to do 1 or 2 things in here. Let's zoom in here to the area that's actually underneath this girl's eye. Yeah, let's talk about this area that's right in here. So it's both a texture thing as well as a tone thing. So again, I'm going to go after texture first. So inside of my split frequency group, I'm going to grab that high layer and I'm going to get the patch tool right here, and I'm going to select this area, and I look for an area where I can make that transition. So I'm running along here, the bottom of this guy right here. I'm trying to sort of line it up with the that line that's underneath her eye, because I need a place. This is going to be an obvious transition, and I simply need a place to make sure that I feel like this has done what it was supposed to do. So I've selected this entire area right here, and then I need to put a different skin tone on there. So I'm not going to run up on the side of her nose. I'm actually going to go to this area that's down here. So I'm simply going to drag and bring this down and let go and hit Command D to deselect. Now, in looking at this, I feel like that replaced the skin texture pretty well. Actually, I want to do that again. I want to show you guys another trick really quickly. So go to your history palette and go back in time, undo that whole thing. So I'm going to go back where I deleted the layer mask. So it brings all of this back. I'm going to actually try this one more time. I'm going to again click on this and drag it across. And select that entire area again, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did before. Again, I'm working on my high copy layer right here by itself, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it down here to the area of her cheek and let go. Now at this stage of the game, and you cannot do this after, this has got to be immediately following this move. And this works for a huge number of tools, but it has to happen immediately after you do the tool. You can't do anything else. If you were to hit deselect right now, this will no longer work. If you were to do any kind of movement at all, this will not work. But as long as this is the only thing that you have done, you can actually come up to your edit menu and you can come down to fade. And this fade will exist for any tool move that we've made. So again, it's got to be immediately after. If you've done anything else, this is no longer will be available to you. But with this fade tool, and the fade tool, it'll change its name depending on the tool you just used. So we just used the patch tool, so it becomes fade patch. If we'd done this with a healing brush tool, it would be fade healing brush. If we'd done this with a clone stamp tool, it would be fade clone stamp tool. But in our case, click on fade patch selection, and a slider will come up. And in this slider, what you can do is you can actually take yourself back in time. So you can grab the slider. If you go all the way back to 0, it undoes everything you just did. If you leave it at 50%, then this is actually a layover. It's a 50% layover of the old texture with the new texture, which again is something that I've tried to tell you guys. It's not something we really want to do in this class, but split frequency work by its very nature is destructive. So that ship's already sailed. If you want to do this and you want to do the $20,000 version of this, you actually go in and do this tonally. You do not do it with these tools, so I'm just giving you guys another trick to actually make this work. Now in my case, I feel like the 50% is not strong enough, so I'm actually going to crank this up a little bit more, and I can leave it at like 70%. Does that look like better skin to you? If you want to see a before and after, you can use the preview button. You can check this, you can turn it on and off to see, and I feel like, and what's your all's call? Do you feel like it's better to have a little bit of that skin texture brought back in?
Yeah.
So where did you...
It like the rest of the eyelashes.
I'm sorry?
It
Yeah, it brings in the rest of the eyelashes again. Yeah, so it's a compromise, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. And then again, I've got this dark area that's sitting under here. So again, I'm going to show you, we'll go back to the brush trick again. Command D to deselect. Go to your low copy for your image right now. Hit the B key to get a brush. I've still got a 2% for the flow of my brush, which seems about right. I'm going to hold down the Option key to sample a new area of skin color, and you can see I've got a light area of skin color right in there. And then I'm going to simply come in here, and again, I'm actually painting just back and forth. And that, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. That did absolutely nothing. Hang on one second. That is not showing my brushwork at all. B key, Command D to make sure you don't have anything selected. I've got that light color. I'm working on my low copy. And now this is beginning to work. So then I'm coming in here and I'm simply going back and forth to actually try to lighten this part up. And you can see now that this part's actually worked pretty good. So this is basically how I would begin this whole process, right? So now let's say you've done all of your retouching. Everything looks really wonderful. It looks great and all of that kind of stuff, whatever. I'm going to double click on the hand to actually do this. However, the image is not knocked out. So my next move on this, I'm going to go ahead and select the frequency, split frequency group. I'm going to go ahead and collapse it just so it doesn't confuse you, so it keeps it relatively. And then I'm going to jump all of this to its own new layer. Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. And it brings a layer up on top that's actually got that same retouching in it. If we zoom way in, you can see that this eye is much better than it was on the bottom. I'm going to turn off the eyeball for the split frequency group, and you can see that again, this is actually got the retouching in it that we actually wanted it to have. And then I would put my layer mask on this thing. So again, come back down, Command click to load this as a selection, add layer mask here. And now I've got my layer mask on top of that. If I've got this on, again, the layer mask needs to be inverted. But now I've actually got the retouched, the split frequency retouched version that I'm actually now layer masking, and then I would start to remove the spill there. The only disadvantage to doing this is that you bake all of your split frequency work into this file right here. Now, I've still got the virgin down here, so I'm not too worried about that. But this thing is cooked now. All my split frequency work is burned into this thing. Yes, I can throw another layer. So here, just so that you guys know this, and I swear to God, we'll take a break. So people would say, okay, well, this worked great, but I don't like the retouching that you did under her eye here. But you've done all the spill removal, you've done all of that part, so you would like to be able to bring this back. You would like to be able to mask this out so that instead of this part showing, the other part, the virgin down here, showed. Make sense? But the problem is I've already got a layer mask on here. I don't want to continue to work on this layer mask. So you need what's called a nested mask. And to do that, what you do is this. You actually add a blank layer group on the top. So this is just going to be called new group. You can drag this layer into it. So this is now sitting inside. This layer mask is controlling this, but now I can add a mask to the layer group itself. And this mask now will control what I see in that entire group. Yes?
For some reason, when I did the, like, Command Option E to, like, jump to a new layer,
Yeah.
and then put the mask on it, like, the mask didn't
Because your split frequency group is still turned on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Are there questions about this? Okay, guys, let's call it 40 till. If you could be back at 55, back at 5 minutes till, that would be great. Is that right? 40 till, yeah, be back at 5 minutes till 11, that'd be terrific.